Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition. That is Nick Suss of the Tennessean. I am Braden Gall. We are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Lots of stuff to do today on a football show. We have Nick. You're back from the Super Bowl, so that was cool. That was fun.
Yeah.
And so we'll discuss your experience at the Super Bowl. I know you had a chance to talk with. Oh yeah. You got a pennant. Look at that. Did you buy some merch? Yeah.
A little bit of Super Bowl stuff. Yeah.
And you didn't have to steal that one like your TD Ameritrade seating side.
Yeah.
We won't tell anybody. All right. So you had a conversation with DeAndre Hopkins after the game, so we'll discuss that. You also talked with a bunch of folks all across the league, and we'll get their perspective on what the Titans should do or will do with the number one pick, as well as their offseason strategy. There are rumors floating around, as is the tradition, with the franchise tag, I believe, deadline starting on the 18th next week. So you've got all kinds of machinations of things that are going to happen as we head into the combine, as teams start to plan their big board and have all these strategies and all these trades. And then, of course, there's lots of rumors coming out of Jacksonville as well as it pertains to John Robinson and Trevor Lawrence. And so we'll get into that. And then I have one Super Bowl prediction for you Tennessee Titans fans that is related to the Tennessee Titans coming up a little bit later on in the show. So we'll do all of that today. And look, you were at the game, so you didn't have to worry about setting up a nice party at your house with Shotgun Willie's Meats. You didn't have to go to Sinkers Beverages to collect a bunch of cocktails and wines and champagnes and bubbles for folks that want to have a libation during the game. And you also didn't have to listen to Tom Brady do a broadcast. So there's all of that happened in your life or didn't happen in your life on Sunday. So Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages, of course. Just first reaction to being at the game. I've been to one. I've never covered one. What did you do in terms of coverage, and what was the experience like for you?
Yeah, a lot of, for people who know me as a media insider, the other podcast you do, I like sneaking around places where I'm not supposed to be, and the Super Bowl is a tough place to do that. Post-game, I did manage to sneak a couple of places I wasn't supposed to be, including the field, so don't tell Fox. But
is Fox in control of all that? Fox is like they bogart the field?
I mean, I was on their set, so they probably didn't want that. But okay. I have a friend who works for Fox. It wasn't just like lingering.
I got you.
But it's tricky covering that game. I did not have a pass that allowed me in the locker rooms. I was only allowed in the interview rooms. So I was kind of limited on who was brought to me, which is more of a college experience than a pro experience. And I was used to covering colleges for long enough that wasn't too much of an impediment. Yep. I was sitting in the auxiliary press box, which means there were fans sitting directly behind me. I was just in a row of media, and then there were 50 rows of fans behind me. And they wouldn't cop to it, but one of the fans behind me spilled a beer on me, and my jacket and my backpack and all that stuff. So I was a little bit wet.
And you smelled like you've been on Bourbon Street.
Yeah. And should I put a major national corporation on blast? Not really my style, but I had a bad experience with one major national corporation.
Look, Nick, this is a local business, a small local business that is supported by local businesses, and we support local businesses. So blast away, my man.
Avis, you're on my crap list. Avis. I had 3 rental cars in 4 days at one point because they kept continuing to stop working, including leaving the Superdome at about 1:30 in the morning and arriving at my rental car in a random neighborhood. I just parked on the street somewhere, which is probably not smart. So I walk up to my rental car at 1:30 in a random neighborhood in New Orleans and completely flat tire. I was staying in Hammond, which is about 65 miles away from New Orleans. I opened the trunk to say, okay, I'll change the tire. No spare. They did not give me a spare tire. So I am driving around New Orleans at 1:30 in the morning, looking for places to inflate a tire at a gas station downtown New Orleans. First gas station I get to, air pump does not work. Second gas station I get to, it's only coin powered. And I did not bring like 8 quarters with me to the Super Bowl. That's not a thing you do. So I'm making change at the gas station close to 2 in the morning. I get it filled up to like maybe 12 PSI and then drive 60 miles across bridges and swamps to get to Hammond. Just white knuckle nervous the entire time driving back. And again, this was already my second rental car because the first one had an engine malfunction that I had to return to the airport on Friday at like 10 p.m. And there were not in New Orleans. Every single car in New Orleans had been booked because it was the Super Bowl. And so all of this is to say, I tried to exchange these. I tried to get new cars. I tried to do everything I could. And Avis kept being like, yeah, I don't know, man. What do you want us to do? I'm like, refund me, give me a new car, tow this car for me. What do you want to do? I'm like,
DYJ.
Can you please help me? And so I got back to Nashville in my third rental car at about 11:45 p.m. on Monday because it still took another 9 hours after I woke up Monday to get a car so I could drive home.
Oh, seriously?
So, holy cow. If you guys have any good rental car suggestions for me, because I don't think I'm going to be using that company any longer.
You work for, here's the thing. My wife works for a large company, the biggest public company in Nashville. You work for a fairly large company. You should have better relationships with these companies.
I should is a really operable word here. So if there are any Avis employees listening, I am not personally mad at you.
No, of course not.
Customer service was not helpful. So if we spoke on the phone and I was a little brusque, I'm sorry. I was covered in beer with a flat tire at 2 a.m. in downtown New Orleans.
It does sound like you've been holding on to this story for this show. It does.
I've told this to a lot of people. I haven't been holding on. But yeah, first time on the air. I know we're 7 minutes in and you guys want to hear about football, but
overrated.
Rental car stories. This is in my bottom 3 rental car experiences of my adult life.
I don't want to hear about the other 2. Did the other one involve a drive to Arkansas?
That was a personal car, but yes, I'll count that one.
D Good says, if your last name wasn't sus, maybe Avis would treat you better. Never heard that one. I'm sure he's never heard that one now that word has become a thing. Jason McDonald says, just going to assume they were all cyber trucks. And Ed, we'll get to this. Eddie says, Jags aren't that dumb, right? D Good says, yes, they are, Edward, which I appreciate. So lots of stuff to get to. All right, let's start with Hopkins here. And you had a chance to talk with Hopkins after the game. What was your intent going into the conversation? Were you trying to get Titan stuff or just talk to him about his experience?
So just frankly, you've interviewed DeAndre. We talked about this last week. He can be a bit of an interesting presence for people who've never been around him before.
Very intense.
And so he comes into the media room after the game, and the Chiefs have just lost the Super Bowl. Sorry to remind you guys, but that's what happened.
Told you that was going to happen.
Yeah, you did. And I told you that it should happen, and I didn't think it would happen anyway. So he gets, I think, a total of 4 questions at the podium, and there's like 40 or 50 stunned media members just trying to get answers out of him, and he is doing the thing where they say, how does it feel to lose the Super Bowl? And he's like, bad.
I mean, I actually don't blame him on that. Like, that's a dumb question, but anyway.
And so I think it's 4 questions, and he's not being super forthcoming because he's not getting the kinds of questions that he responds to. And so he leaves. Nobody has any more questions after these 4 stunned, silent questions, and he walks out the room. So I just kind of followed him out of the room to say, hey, good to see you, appreciate you, give him a fist bump or whatever, walk out the room. And he kind of waves me over, and it seems he kept wanting to keep talking. So I didn't have much of an agenda. It was,
but he wanted to actually have a conversation and not get, call and response, silly, obvious questions. Yeah.
And I'm not telling this story to brag about my ability to walk out of a room with somebody. Again, I go where I'm not supposed to sometimes.
You're so good at it, though. Really.
But more, I wanted to bring this up just to dispel the really bad fake tweet that I don't know if people saw going around the other day. He told me he wants to play another 3 years. I do not think he is intending to retire. That was really the only thing. We don't have to talk about DeAndre Hopkins too much longer. And maybe he does call it quits. Who knows? But he did say he doesn't know if it'll be with the Chiefs, but he does want to play another 3 years. So I do not think we have seen the end of DeAndre Hopkins.
I don't think so either. I don't know how good he's going to be. I mean, like That's just you look at it's hard to not look at him and go, well, you're not the same player that might be a Hall of Famer, like he's just not. Although I did make a bunch of cash on that late meaningless touchdown that he scored. That was a nice anytime touchdown that covered all my bets for the entire day. So that was nice. Thank you, DeAndre.
Yeah, I think in the entire history of the NFL, the only two people who had more career receiving yards going into their first Super Bowl were Tim Brown and Marvin Harrison. Like, that is a long career to go into your first Super Bowl. Yep. And again, good for him. He caught a touchdown. He was not happy. Like, I asked him if the touchdown felt good, and he's like, not really.
And I appreciate that. That is exactly the response you should get from a veteran like that, where you score a touchdown, but you understand it. Like, you completely know exactly what the situation is. And he didn't celebrate at all. Like, he caught the touchdown and he didn't celebrate at all. So, so we shall see. All right. So I want to get to what the Titans, sort of the perspective of the Titans, the perception of the Titans, what they feel for the Titans, and all that stuff in terms of your conversations. It's sort of what happened at the Senior Bowl as well, which is a lot of folks talking about strategy. Again, I had an sitting SEC football coach ask me, what are they going to do? So like, it is the thing that people are talking about. And I do realize I've been talking to some Nashville folks as well about this. And people are, I don't know about you, I'm not at all bored with it at all. I'm sure Titans fans aren't bored with it, but it is going to be like, we are going to have to be pretty creative over the course of the next 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks before we get to the draft, because we are obsessed with the number one pick. That's the way this is, which is fine.
Last year, we had to be creative in how many ways we would write, will Joe Alt be available at 7? Like, it was just 4 months of that. And the answer ended up being no. But like, it was just 4 months of that. Draft is draft. Everybody kind of can zero in. At least this year, there are theoretically 5 options available to the Titans, 4 players in a trade. And then the trade, we've talked about how many different ways you can do that and all that stuff. There's seemingly infinite options. And by infinite, I mean like 12, which is fun.
Very close to infinite. So I actually have, and we'll get to Jacksonville in a little while, I have like the perfect scenario that is now beginning to present itself. And I think the Titans need to get into the middle of this Trevor Lawrence conversation. Like, I think they need to actually tamper. Like, legally or illegally, I don't know, but they need to tamper. There needs to be tampering happening. But I'll get to that in a minute. All right. So what was the overwhelming sentiment from around the NFL about what the Titans are going to do versus what maybe they should do? Do you have any sense of that?
I made it my purpose to phrase it as should. I was just curious, the perspective of, well, you've seen the Titans play. What would you do? And I wouldn't say it was overwhelming, but I would say majority, more than half, were on this team's not a quarterback away camp of, you can pick Cam Ward, but you're still probably a year or two away if you do that. And if you acquire picks, you are more likely to put the quarterback in position to succeed in the future than you are to put them in a position to struggle as a rookie. If you don't trade back, we've talked about this before, you don't get that 3rd round pick back. So you have 3 major needs behind quarterback, and you're really only able to address one of them with the top 100 pick in the 2nd round there, and all that stuff that we all know. So I think that was the prevailing opinion. But if you guys go to Tennessean.com, I wrote a story. I pulled, I can't remember, 15, 16 NFL wide experts, former players, analysts type things. I'll pick a smattering of quotes that I liked, just to read you off. Kevin Clark probably had the one that's the easiest to pull out as a soundbite, if you guys are into that sort of thing. He says, Cam Ward, no matter what, he's a culture changer. He is as Mahomesian a prospect as there's been since Mahomes. I think he's the guy that can turn them around very quickly. So if you are on the Cam Ward train, congrats. You've got Kevin Clark there. One of my favorite...
real quickly, observation on this. I want to kind of take these piece by piece, if you don't mind. So, quick observation on this, and I said this on Monday's show with PK. After talking to some folks and sort of doing my own research and sort of spending some more time with it, I have come around on Cam over Shador pretty solidly. I was sort of waffling back and forth kind of consistently for a few weeks. I'm pretty sure I'm on Cam now. I don't know if that means I like him at 1 or 3 or 6 or 12, but I think he's clearly better than Shador Sanders. Did you get that sense in these conversations? Obviously, Kevin Clark agrees, but did you get the sense that Cam Ward, amongst the group think, has clearly separated himself from Shador in this conversation?
Yeah, I think that the only 2 people who I spoke to who brought up Shador ahead of Cam One, and this speaks to a comment I got in over text via a co-host of yours on Mondays. Why should anyone care about what Pac-Man Jones thinks? Pac-Man personally thinks that Shador is the better quarterback, and that is a good question, Paul. That is a solid question, Paul Kaharski.
Why fans are silly sometimes, and fans care about Pac-Man Jones.
Why should anyone care about what Pac-Man Jones thinks? I don't know, but a lot of them did. That story,
tough but fair, Paul,
had some interest. I do not personally know, but I recognized that they would. So
speak of the devil.
Story. Yeah, and I was
Paul, Miami guy.
Thank you for the add-on. Yeah,
no good deed, Nick.
Pac-Man tended to think Shador was the better option, and so did Jacob Hester, who friend of yours, right? You know Jacob pretty well.
I've worked with him a little bit.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Jacob was the most conflicted of anyone. I think I transcribed the full quote where the first 3 sentences were him saying, "Oh God, oh no, what do I do? Oh my gosh, what do I say?" He was very, very conflicted, but he landed on Shador. Other than that, almost everybody leaned Cam as the better quarterback prospect. But it's pretty interesting that almost anybody who I brought up, well, you also have the option to trade. They're like, "Oh yeah, that then." Like that. There were a couple of people who leaned pretty hard into the idea of O-line no matter what. I think these were people who watched the Titans play last year and just came away with this idea of, well, the problem was the quarterback kept getting crushed. I think Daryl Johnston was kind of leading that charge of like, I called a couple of Titans games last year, and the big problem is they couldn't protect anybody. Now, obviously that is tentacles. We understand that some of that was Will Levis, some of that was game planning, all this stuff. But like, some people really leaned on that idea of, well, if it's the first round, if it's the second round, whatever it is, that right tackle is the most important thing. I think the only person who told me just pick Abdul Carter, best player available type thing, was Devin McCourty, which was interesting to kind of lean that direction. Got a couple of Travis Hunters. I was really interested. Cynthia Freeland from NFL Network, the analytics guru, leaned Travis Hunter, which seems like, I can't tell if Travis Hunter is the analytics pick or the total football bro pick. It might be both.
Huh. Yeah.
Of like, I am fascinated of what community is going to embrace. Maybe it's both. Maybe the extreme analytics are, if you have a guy who can play 120 snaps a game, that's the ultimate game breaker. And maybe the extreme football guy take is, dude's just the best football player. But Nate Burleson was another one who told me, like, all these ideas of, oh, you can't play both ways in the NFL. These are grown men now. Nate was like, he was playing 26-year-olds in college. Like, this is a different caliber of grown man, but let's not pretend he was playing a bunch of 15-year-olds. Like, this is different. The league is different. College is different now. So there was some push for Travis Hunter. But yeah, the two most frequent answers were, just draft Cam Ward. You're not in this position often. And who was it who said something along those lines? Kenneth saying the problem with the trade back idea, the wait for next year idea, is you can't guarantee the quarterback's going to be there next year. You can guarantee a quarterback is going to be there every year. It's just a matter of which quarterback do you actually believe can be the guy.
And I think Arch Manning is better than these guys. I feel comfortable with that. I don't know that Drew Aller is probably better than these guys, but I don't know. I think Cam Ward and Drew Aller are maybe closer than people think. But you at least have 2 or 3, maybe a fourth option that you know for sure are probably going to be top 10, 12, 15-ish picks, and you're probably going to be picking in the top 12, 10, 15. You're right that you can't say it specific. You can't use specifics to talk about next year. You can't say I'm going to get this guy or I'm going to pick here. But if you talk broadly and try to give yourself as best a picture as you can, the clearest picture as you can, it's hard not to think that next year's options are better. That's all. And that's the best you can do. I mean, that's the best you can do. These guys hadn't even met Cam Ward yet. So it's like, if you're the Titans front office and coaching staff, so it's like, you haven't met Drew Aller either. Like, you can do a good job evaluating them. You can watch film on these guys. And if you're a scout of a quarterback, you can look at Drew Aller and you can look at Cam Ward and you can probably have a pretty clear opinion based on their tape, which is still the most important part of this decision. So
yeah,
I think the Titans can have a pretty good idea of which class they like better. I think it may not be perfect, but it'll be close.
And as we've talked about before, like, there's a point that Eddie just made, I think it was, of, oh, well, we're going to be picking in the top 5 next year anyway. What are we talking about? Like, the trade back positions you either way. Of, if you're picking in the top 5 again next year because your team stinks, now you can package those to trade up, get to 1, do what you need to do. Think about what the Bears did, getting up to trading back with the Panthers, all that stuff. You can position for stuff and have those picks next year if you stink again. Or if you're good, if you trade back and it works and you're better, like fans hope you are, now you have 2 first-round picks to plug holes. And if you're, we're 2 players away, bang, bang. So
and
it's
if it's
flexibility.
And if it's the Giants or the Raiders or the Jets or the Jags, or they might be top 5 too.
Yeah. And
so you're probably getting a top 10 pick potentially already. So,
and this general perception of Arch waiting another year, I know that is a fun thing to speculate about. If Arch Manning goes out and plays well, he's going to be the number 1 pick, and there's no reason to wait. Like, oh, he wants to play more college football. There's no reason to wait.
I've heard that too from people in Texas, and I get what you're saying as well. I think it's hard to guess on that. I think there's common sense, and then there's what the Mannings have done historically when they close ranks and sort of make a group decision, a generationally, sort of like 3-generation group decision with like a little bit of David Cutcliffe sprinkled in, which is interesting to me. I think the thing is he's already done the waiting also. Like he's done 2 years of waiting now, so he's going to be ready to go. I would think there's some interesting stuff here. Austin says trade back, sign Rodgers, draft Will Howard. I know that would make Stoney Keeley and JT very happy. I'm starting to come around on Will Howard, but not until like the 4th or 5th round. I like Kyle McCord a little bit better. I like the other Ohio State quarterback better. Rodgers, I think Rodgers is the best option potentially if all the other good options aren't available, i.e. Matt Stafford or Russell Wilson or, some of those kind of names.
Stupid SEC brain. I genuinely thought you meant Will Rogers. I'm like, is he going to get drafted?
No,
I don't think he will.
Although I thought he's Big Ten brain. Didn't he play for Washington?
Yeah.
Somebody said Cam Ward. Here we go. Purple says Cam Ward equals not SEC Anthony Richardson. Not even close to the same player.
Not comparable at all.
Not even from a skill set standpoint. They're not even close. If they take Milroe, everyone should be fired, unless it's like a 3rd or 4th round pick. I kind of have come around on that. As well. Let's see here. What else we got? Milroe is AR light. That one's a little bit more comparable than Cam Ward, but
I've told you guys for months and months and months, I think Jalen Milroe is a lot like Malik Willis in the good ways and the bad ways. There's a lot of talent to be harnessed.
I think that's good. I think that's the right comp. Coach Will says, Aller, ultimate game changer, Penn State wide receivers non-existent. I agree with that. And he's won a lot of games, and he's gotten better. He protects the football, does not turn the ball over. Big, huge frame, a little bit more athletic than people realize. So I think I don't think it's hard for a coaching staff to see 2 full seasons of Drew Aller and like 4 full seasons of Cam Ward on tape and have a very good opinion of which one they like better. I think that's totally I think you can absolutely make those calls inside the walls of the Tennessee Titans football facility. All right, I'm scrolling through the comments here. Let's see what else we got. Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Let's see here. This is Jason. Since 1998, the average draft position after having the first overall is about 10. I have not done the research on that. That sounds like a geek corner there.
My sign's all the way over there. I need to grab it.
If kicking the can down the road for another quarterback were easy, Levis wouldn't be the quarterback. Derek Carr better than Aaron Rodgers. I could be on board with that. D good. He's got a no trade
production
clause.
Help.
Oh, look at that! You got an assistant in there. Tell Mrs. Suss we said hello. What do you think about Derek Carr over Aaron Rodgers?
In what sense?
I think D good is saying he's a better starting quarterback.
I don't.
Harder to acquire, but.
I do not personally believe that he is better at playing quarterback. If you are talking about the scope of what it will do for the team, it is probably a less toxic thing to bring in Derek Carr. It's a risk-reward situation of there is a lot more risk bringing in, what will it be, 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who,
sure.
Look, he threw for 3,800 yards last year. It's not like he was a bad player. He had a solid season. He was probably the league average quarterback, and Derek Carr was, when healthy, a little bit above league average, but wasn't healthy very often. I think that Derek Carr's ceiling is certainly lower if Aaron Rodgers was league average on his first year coming off of an Achilles, if he can have a bounce back year, you're looking at a guy who can still be a top 10 caliber quarterback, but he has to do it on his terms with his players and with his schemes and all of that stuff. Yeah. And that does change your dynamic completely. Whereas Derek Carr can do your dynamic. He shows up day one and he knows the playbook. And that's not me talking out of my butt. I've heard that from informed people.
Yes,
Derek Carr would absolutely just already know how to play the game the Titans want to play. And that is a huge built-in advantage. But there are also limitations to a guy who has, is it played one or won one playoff game in like 13 years?
I think
ceiling Carr's, is what it is.
I think Derek Carr's league average as well, and I think a little bit of age on Rodgers and the knowledge base, familiarity with the coaching staff, the relationships that could make him a better option. I'm not necessarily going to argue. I'm not going to die on that hill. I think they are two of the better options amongst a group of average options. We'll get to Stafford in a second. At least Rodgers could create more intrigue for free agents. I guess that's true. Personally, this is ultimately what I think Kenneth is dancing around here. One of the most important points that's really hard to prove right now. Personally, trade back is my number 2 choice, but acting like it's some foolproof plan is silly. None of these plans are foolproof, in my opinion. Fools get fired in the NFL front offices every single year. Then Callahan probably gets fired as a result of being bad again. Either way, you draft the wrong quarterback at number 1. You draft a defensive end at number 1. You trade back, you could still be bad, and Callahan could still be fired. That the ultimate question here is, how does Brian Callahan's job security impact their decision making? And that is a very tricky thing to answer because we don't know exactly how much Brinker and Borgonzi are committed to or in love with Brian Callahan, developing Brian Callahan as a coach. We just don't know.
And also just, look, if you make your job security decisions based on somebody else's job security, you end up being the next one on the chopping block. And that's not to say that this is a cutthroat situation where it's Brinker and Borgonzi versus Callahan or whatever. But like, I do not believe that Brinker and Borgonzi are going to make decisions based off of what they believe is best for Brian Callahan. I think what is best for Brian Callahan can be what is also best for Brinker and Borgonzi. They don't have to be at odds.
I think that's right.
But let's not pretend here that it's like, oh, the GMs who we think are making the decision, the GM and the president of football ops, who we had all this month-long debate about, they're the ones who have final say. Suddenly they're like, oh, but what's going to be good for this guy? Like, they're going to do what they think is best for the long-term potential of the team. And if Callahan can harness that, he'll be the coach. If he can't, Brinker and Borgonzi will have a difficult conversation to be talking about next January.
I think there's a lot of talk in Nashville right now about the Nashville Predators and the direction that Barry Trotz has chosen, the general manager, to take that franchise. There's a lot of people that say, I'm just glad he chose a direction. And some people are saying, no, he chose the wrong direction, right? So there's a balance there. I think what's interesting about this situation for the Titans is that there's a lot of different paths to get to the same sort of point.
Yeah.
And if the point is just better football with more wins now and even better football beyond that, you could do it with a rental and no drafting quarterback. You could do it with a rental and a drafted quarterback who sits on the bench. You could try to do it with a rookie quarterback and try to build around him. Like, you could do it a lot of different ways, and there's no guarantee that any of them work. I mean, none of these plans are foolproof. I think our theory is that there are so many problems with the team that the front office has told us they want X number of picks, 30 picks and 12 in the top 100. The only way to do that is to trade down. And if I personally don't think either of these quarterbacks, or now I might just start saying Cam Ward, if Cam Ward is not worthy of that pick, then it seems pretty obvious that you make the best decision for your organization, which is to make the football team as good as possible. And that's the trade back option. So.
Interesting conversation that I had with Matt Hasselbeck at the Super Bowl, former Titans quarterback, obviously Matt Hasselbeck. He played for a long time in both Green Bay and Seattle under the Ron Wolf model, the Packers way model that we spent so much time discussing. And I kind of asked him, hey, so what is the thing that makes that distinct from the Steelers way or the Ravens way or whatever we consider the Eagles way, the successful models? And he kind of said the Ron Wolf model sometimes hinges on having more depth and more competition at quarterback than anyone else is willing to have. And if you think about it, that is kind of a consistent trend of Green Bay had Brett Favre, but they still went out and got Hasselbeck. Hasselbeck went to Seattle, and he was the de facto starter, but they still went out and got Trent Dilfer that year. And you go through it, and Green Bay with you have Brett Favre, go get Aaron Rodgers. The Chiefs, you have Alex Smith, go get Patrick Mahomes. You have Rodgers, go get Jordan Love. This idea of your backup's team, not going to go.
Washington drafted Robert Griffin and Kirk Cousins in the same four rounds. Yeah.
And so you are not going to have a situation where, oh, shoot, we paid Jalen Hurts $51 million. What do we do? We can't Kenny Pickett league minimum. Like, that is probably not going to be the situation if you are using the Ron Wolf, et cetera, Ted Thompson model. And so that is something that does kind of point toward the idea of, I don't know if this is an either or proposition. If it is deemed that Will is not part of the competition, which we still can't rule out, he's on roster. He is the Titans quarterback and under contract.
It seems very it seems very hard to believe that he would not be.
But so even if we are counting Will out, I would be a little bit surprised if the Titans don't sign and also acquire. This might be a 2 quarterback offseason, is my point. Another thing that Hasselbeck said, which goes to Coach Wills's comment, the second one there, if you want to pull that up, the identity thing, the culture thing. Matt said something along the lines of, the easiest way to explain culture in an NFL locker room is if you ask all 100 guys in the room a question. All 100 of them will be able to answer it the same way. And that's a pretty easy way to distill culture. But then he went on to say, when a team is struggling, the problem isn't that they can't all answer the question the same way. The problem is they don't know the question yet. And I think that's kind of the stage the Titans are in, where before you can build a culture of, hey, we're all, to steal from PJ Fleck, we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. They have to decide where the boat's going. Like, they have to pick a direction before they can row in that direction. Yeah. And so I think sometimes when we talk about culture, we skip the figuring out what your culture is going to be, because we hear the fast, physical, aggressive.
That's every football team.
Every team wants that. The thing that actually makes a culture stand out is when you're doing something that nobody else is doing. And so I have a story on this on Tennessee, and you can read this, but I talked to Samaje Perine a little bit, who played with Callahan in those Bengals years where they were brutally bad and then very, very good. And I said, hey, kind of, what was the difference? What allows a team to turn around like that? And he says it is just all a function of belief in the direction. And he says it's players. He says that coaches have very little to do with that. They can set the direction, but then players kind of have to adopt the direction. Yeah. But it is a fascinating thing of, like, the difference between the Bengals in 2020 and 2021. The roster was essentially the same, except they went out and got Jamar Chase. Like, very few players were actually different. And Jamar Chase is a really important piece. I'm not going to diminish the fact of getting the best receiver in football, but, like,
with a top 5 pick.
Yeah, it is essentially the same roster, but the difference is they went from being a team that didn't think they were any good to being a team that thought, well, why can't we be any good?
And for that analogy,
the flips. Yeah,
for that analogy to work, Cam Ward has to be Joe Burrow, and nobody thinks that necessarily. At least at this situation, it could be Arch Manning next year in theory, I guess. But I mean, it helps when you have the one of the 3 or 4 best humans on the planet at what they do the draft before, and that was sort of like, oh, now we believe. I do think that if you're talking about, and this is where we can get into Stafford here, but I do think that Derek Carr, for some strange reason, I think would establish what Brian Callahan wants to do the most accurately. It's a short-term fix, but it does feel like that if you're trying to, like, hey, we don't have the answer at quarterback, or maybe we drafted Cam Ward, but we want him to sit behind Derek Carr for a year. Like, what, again, to your point, lots of different pathways to get to the end result. If the end result is I want to implement my offensive scheme to create that confidence so that people play fast and we score points and we win games, Derek Carr feels like he might be the best first step of that. I don't think he's better than Matt Stafford, obviously. But I think we could argue about Rodgers. We could argue about Justin Fields. I don't think Justin Fields establishes the culture or the system the way they want, at least Brian Callahan. Same thing with a player like Jalen Milroe or, these guys that sort of Shedeur Sanders. I think a lot of these guys play a different style of football than what Brian Callahan wants to do. And I think that's where Cam Ward might be that. Derek Carr definitely is. I think Rodgers probably would as well, and I think Stafford would be the best of all of those guys. Rumors are that Stafford, of course, is more likely to be on a different team than the Rams. That is still there's still a chance that they figure out the negotiation. And I want to say he's only got like a $4 million cap hit this year, and then like none next year. So this is a very interesting situation. You and I have you've said it on the show. I agree with you. I think most people agree that Matthew Stafford is the best possible option at the position for anyone in the league. Obviously, that would include the Titans. Do you feel like these rumors are I get a feeling that this is about negotiation for the Rams and Stafford. If Cooper Kupp is gone and they got all those young players in the draft last year, they still have a window here, and Stafford still gives them the best chance to win over the next 2 seasons, maybe. I don't think he's got much more left in the tank. Do you get a sense that there's some realistic odds that he gets moved? I heard Minnesota seems like you could trade Sam Darnold for Matt Stafford, and he has a relationship with Kevin O'Connell, lots of pieces ready to win right away. You got McCarthy in the wings waiting, could learn from Matt Stafford. Minnesota feels like a really good fit for Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I will say I do not have I'm not a person who makes these big, broad forecasts. I'm not a bettor. I would bet he stays with the Rams because that's the best situation for him, and that's the best situation for the Rams. Now, leverage being what it is, you have these conversations with everybody to try and get the best for your client, the best for your team, the best for your individual. He could be available. And if he's available via free agency, I think that is a really good thing for the Titans to pursue. If he's available via trade, you really have to think about that because that directly goes against everything the Titans have been saying they want to be and they want to do. And so are you willing to give up assets for probably at most 2 years of an aging quarterback? I don't know if that would necessarily fit what the Titans are aiming for, but that doesn't mean it's impossible, in the same way that for 3 months now we've been saying, well, it's possible. Like, we've all heard it, we've all seen the rumors, we've all acknowledged that Matthew Stafford could be available, and he's a really good option. But it's a different really good option if you can get him for $4 million a year off of the free agent market versus $4 million a year off the free agent market plus a 3rd round pick.
Yeah. I don't think it's an option if you have to trade. I don't feel like.
Yeah, that's a short way of saying what I just rambled about.
Ed says, how much say do you think Callahan will have in drafting a quarterback? I would hope he has plenty of say. Maybe not in the final decision, but
that's what I was going to ask.
Ed,
do you mean which quarterback or whether it's a quarterback? Because I think those are 2 different conversations. I think he will have say in both. I'm not saying that he's going to be completely left out, but which quarterback I think would come down to him.
Well, let's play out the meeting. Like, let's just, on a human level, let's play out the meeting. If they sit down, if Mike Morganzi, Chad Brinker, and whoever else, offensive staff with Brian Callahan, they're all in the room and they start to debate this, the first thing they'll debate is Cam versus Shador. That's the first thing they would do. And if at any point someone in that room is among the big 3, let's say, is saying to the front office, or the front office is saying, we don't like Shador Sanders, we want Cam Ward, and Brian Callahan's like, no, I want Shador Sanders, I don't like Cam Ward, they've already failed if they're not going to listen to the coach. And then the next conversation is, I don't think this guy is good enough to be a starting quarterback on our team or worthy of the number 1 pick, or I think he's more of a 2nd round pick, and you make him go number 1 anyway. Again, I feel like you've kind of already missed the boat here. I'm not saying you have to take Callahan's word for everything as gospel, but like, what are y'all all doing? If you cannot force a player on a coach who doesn't love that situation. And of course they're all going to come out and say, hey, well, it was all collaborative, we all sat in the room and we're going to have a unified front to the public because that's kind of what you have to do. It doesn't make any sense to take in Callahan's input on this, where he says, I don't think Cam Ward is a starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he's worth the number 1 pick. And for the front office to say, tough. Like that doesn't feel like a successful strategy to me. No.
It does not seem like a thing that does the thing the Titans want to be doing, which is build a team that wins. Yeah. Like, It's just unnecessarily fractious. But look, as we said earlier, the people in the front office have to make decisions for the long-term viability of the franchise. The coaching staff has to make decisions for the short-term viability of the franchise. And those two things should be married together, but sometimes they're at odds.
Sinkers, Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, always married together, never at odds. If you want good, delicious meats and a nice meal and then a nice cold beer, they're the perfect place to go. Best brisket in the city, not by me. I mean, that's what I think. That American Black Hawk Farms Wagyu beef eats like filet, boys and girls. It's delicious. I had some yesterday. I had a lunch meeting there on Wednesday. I went with a buddy of mine, and we had a great meal. And the first time he'd ever been there, brisket, he said, spectacular, absolutely great. And what's interesting is you, the Nashvillians, have named Shotgun Willie's Barbecue the best barbecue in the city. And you, the Nashvillians, have named Sinkers Beverages 4-time liquor store of the year. You, the Nashvillians, have labeled Sinkers Beverages as the top craft beer retailer in the city. Huge walk-in fridge with beers from all over Nashville and all over the South and all over the country. Great craft beer. So again, when I say great meats and great beer, it's the best as voted on by all of you, the Nashvillians. So Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Here's my evil plan. This is like my.
Does it have to be evil? Can we spin it as a positive?
Oh, it's positive for the Titans, maybe for the Steelers, but not for the Jaguars. So I want the Titans to get involved in this trade. This is just rumors here. It's just some insiders that are kind of floating the idea that maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers are interested in Trevor Lawrence. I think that would be really dumb if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars to move on Trevor Lawrence now that you've got a new infrastructure in place. I don't know if you hired the right coach in Liam Cohen. I don't know if you hired John Robinson, if you've hired the right GM. Titans fans are going to have lots of opinions about both. But let's just say hypothetically that they are actually interested in doing this. The reports and the rumors are sort of like a first and a second round pick, maybe for Trevor Lawrence from the Pittsburgh Steelers. If I'm the Steelers, I'd do it in 2 seconds because I think Trevor Lawrence gives you an opportunity to win Super Bowls on the right team with the right organization. And I think everyone would see how poorly managed the surrounding cast was in Jacksonville very quickly with Trevor Lawrence. Here's the thing. If you're the Jaguars, the only way you do this by acquiring a bunch of picks is to rebuild quickly. You need to convince them that you'll be the one that they can trade up to number one to get. You have to go. You're the Titans. You go to John Robinson, hypothetically, and you say, we'll give you a sweetheart deal. You can come up to 1. We'll move back to 5. We'll give you a sweetheart deal. You can draft Cam Ward. The Titans win on every level here. They get Trevor Lawrence out of their division. They give a quarterback that maybe we don't believe in to their arch rival in the division, and they stockpile draft picks. I don't know how they could do it legally, but I feel like they need to be involved in pushing Trevor Lawrence out the door. They need to help the Jaguars figure out how to replace Trevor Lawrence with Cam Ward. That's what they've got to do. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how it'll work. I don't know how it'll happen legally. It's probably against the rules in the NFL handbook. But I think the trade itself makes no sense to me if I'm a Jaguars fan. So make it happen. Make it happen, Titans.
Look, if we've talked about the better's remorse idea of if the Titans don't pick the quarterback and he's great for the Giants, imagine if the Titans don't pick the quarterback and he's great for the Jacksonville Jaguars. That will be the. Gosh, I was going to make a reference to Merkel's boner from 1907, so I'm sorry, but that would be up there with the dumbest sports decisions in the history of sports. And yes, that's what it's called. Don't Google it; it's weird. But
it's not an actual boner, is what you're saying.
It is not. That's just what they called mistakes back then.
Got it.
But
not the former mayor of Nashville, Bill Boner, who also made a boner decision on television.
Yeah, but either way, that would be the thing you're guarding against, is even if that is a really, really smart play for the Tennessee Titans, if you give that option to the Jaguars and they pick the quarterback and they end up being holy shoot good, then you have.
That's what Kenneth is saying here.
Yeah.
No, look, but you don't do that if you believe Cam Ward is great. So the only reason you do that is if you think he sucks.
But even people that you don't believe are great can end up being great.
I've never heard of Josh Allen. It's not a thing. It's never happened. Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, never heard of these guys. Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, never heard of them. Never heard of any of those guys. No, I just think it's funny, that John Robinson is interviewing with the Jaguars, that the Jaguars are, for whatever reason, maybe they're not even actually considering this, but this is a thing that is now out there in the conversations. I just find it to be utterly fascinating. And it's probably a bunch of nothing. He's probably not going to get the job, and Lawrence is probably not going to get traded. And the Steelers are going to, like, because again, you could then go try to get Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson might be a better version of Aaron Rodgers right now, honestly, for this situation. So it's utterly fascinating because it hits all my like Titans news, player movement, front office, erogenous zones. So it's very interesting to me. And if you're the Jags, you obviously would want to use all that draft capital to try to reload and rebuild quickly. And if you needed to draft a quarterback, I got a number 1 pick to sell you. Justin Fields does not do what Brian Callahan wants. I like Justin Fields. I think he's an interesting player. I think in the right system, he could be fun. That's not what Callahan looks for in a quarterback. It's just not. He needs processing and accuracy, and Fields has neither.
Yeah. As we've learned many times, if you want Justin Fields, go get Jake Fromm.
He needs to be on the bench to be motivated, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yelled at. People need to yell at him from the student section in Athens. So I'm reading this comment sort of in real time. I wish someone had real information on what the world sounded like prior to drafting McNair. One regret about my age being a Titans fan. So that's a deep cut right there. There was a lot of the same stuff.
I think that maybe people don't remember what the NFL looked like pre-2008. Of like that year Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco came out was the first time that rookies were really expected to start week 1. Like, I think before those guys, there were maybe 6 or 7 quarterbacks in the history of the NFL who started 12, 15, 16 games as a rookie. Peyton was one of them. And there were some, like I think Dave Craig or something like there are some.
Drew Bledsoe start right away? I feel like he did.
I can't recall if he did, but more often than not, the expectation was that quarterbacks were going to sit. So there wasn't as much hubbub around McNair, I would imagine. Well, again, I am young as well, Coach Wills.
No, but I think the scouting reports were very predictable. Level of competition was a huge question. Can you be that kind of athlete in the NFL? Huge question. And a lot of it was laced. It was very clearly laced with racial implications on this. Can he run an offensive system in the NFL? It's all the same stuff. It is I should say this. It's predictable stuff, but it's pure raw physicality, athleticism. When you met what was different about Steve McNair is that when you saw him in person, that's when it like solidified in your brain, like, oh, this is a different shaped human being. Then so like if you met him in person, Jeff Fisher and they go down and meet with him before they draft him, he is so built like an NFL linebacker that it's just different. Like it's different. Brett Favre was built that way. There's certain guys that were just built that way, and they're not built like Lamar Jackson. They're not built like Jaden Daniels. Like Steve McNair was built like a middle linebacker, like a massive human.
Sure.
So,
and I guess the point I'm making here is like there was probably less of a stigma on drafting a project quarterback back then because almost all quarterbacks were viewed as projects.
Yeah.
The expectation for, I don't think John Elway started week 1 as a rookie. Did he? Like, I think that even these.
No, he played in, didn't he get drafted by the UFL or whatever? Canadian League or something?
He got drafted by the Colts and then immediately traded or whatever it was. You can fact check me.
I'll double check.
A little young, but like, as I know it, as I remember it, it wasn't really until that 2008 draft where Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco both took teams to the playoffs as rookies that the expectation started to shift of, oh, you drafted a quarterback, go change the team right now. And so like the stigma on Ward or Shador or whoever these guys are, if they have to be like starter guys from day one, is going to be different than it was for McNair. Just because McNair played in an era where it was expected that quarterbacks sat and learned for a few years. So the pressure is always going to be a little bit higher. And would it be beneficial if more quarterbacks got the opportunity to sit like Steve McNair did? Probably.
Jordan Love benefited for sure.
But you
Patrick Mahomes.
You also understand that you play in a league where if you're not winning now, the coach who drafted you is not going to coach you by the time you're ready to play.
Yep.
So
Elway was number one. He started 10 games, started 10 games, played in 11 his rookie year, 1983. That's the famous Jim Kelly Testaverde class of 83.
Marino, yeah.
Amber says, I forgot about that guy. Amber says, didn't they say Lamar was a dual threat, but now Cam and Shador are not athletic enough? No one is saying Cam and Shador are not athletic enough. I think they're plenty athletic. I think what they do with that athleticism is the concern for Shador in particular, which is that he doesn't stay in the pocket. He doesn't go through his progressions, and his arm is not necessarily as strong as it needs to be. They're both also a little undersized relative to, the 6'4", 6'5", 230-pounder. That's not what they are either. And so, I think that's the question. It's not about athleticism. I don't think, Drew Aller is not a great athlete. He's good enough, but he's not a great athlete. Arch Manning is a great athlete. But
sure,
that's the issue. Like, it's not about being athletic enough. It's about
But let's also
processing.
Let's also put it this way: of like every once in a while, I'll run into somebody who says, "Man, I hate country music, but I'm okay with Johnny Cash." Yeah, that's the best one. Like comparing anyone to Lamar Jackson, that's the best one. Like he's the best one at it. So it's like, oh, I don't like dual threat quarterbacks except Lamar. Lamar Jackson's the best to ever be a dual threat quarterback. That's why he keeps winning MVPs and All Pros, and he's the best regular season quarterback we've seen since Peyton Manning,
and has gotten hurt multiple times and not won enough playoff games.
Yeah, and so sure, if we're saying, oh, do they have the athleticism of Lamar Jackson? No, nobody in the history of the NFL, save maybe like Michael Vick, Randall Cunningham, like your top of the top tier, have had Lamar Jackson's athleticism. Sorry to soapbox. I am not angry at you, Amber. But like my problem with draft comps in general is like you're always comparing everybody to a great player. It's like you're watching a fourth round and someone's like, oh, this guy's got shades of Nick Bosa. No, he doesn't. He wouldn't have gone in the fourth round if he had shades of Nick Bosa. He would have gone third overall. He would have gone there.
I want to hear Matt Miller and Mel Kiper arguing on draft night in like round number 3 about like, Jared Ivey or something. And they're just like, he's got who is the Titans? Was it Austin Johnson they drafted?
Yeah.
Like they got shades of Austin Johnson.
It's just like you're in the 6th round and somebody's like, oh, shades of Nicholas Petit Frere. Like that's that's what happens. It's if you're in the 6th round, it's not Trent Williams.
He's got a lot of Des Fitzpatrick skill set. Now the guys are just catching strays. Anyway, all right. Quickly here, so we'll wrap up. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Boys Barbecue. I'm going to float this at the end here because, only for you dedicated hardcore Titans fans and listeners and audience members do you get this information. I'm going to make a Super Bowl prediction about the Tennessee Titans.
Okay.
It's not what you think I'm going to say. So go to Shotgun Boys Barbecue, Sinkers Beverages. I think our city gets the Super Bowl earlier than we think.
And by that you mean
so the stadium will open. It will be completed in January or February of 2027.
Correct.
So the first season will be fall of 2027. Will be the first season of the Super Bowl. The 30-acre initial development area, the IDA, around the stadium is going to take like 20 years to build.
Correct.
Okay. So lots of construction, lots of dirt and mess for a long time. The Super Bowl is not the only thing that our city is going to go after. We're going to have WWE. We're going to have CMA Fest in there already. We're going to get a college football national championship game, and we're going to get a Final Four. Those 3 things are all going to happen. And the question is how and when and where and what order do they all happen? And what you cannot have is a bunch of projects starting up around the new Titan Stadium and then stopping those projects for the Super Bowl in 2031 or 2032 or 2033. You can't have that happening. You got to have the Super Bowl before you start all those big buildings and big projects. So my theory is, so first season, 27, second season, 28. We've heard Burke Nihill say this, that you need generally 1, probably 2 seasons before the NFL will give you a Super Bowl. I would not be surprised that if we get the Super Bowl 1 year earlier than I've been saying, which is 2030 with the 2031 January Super Bowl or February Super Bowl. I would not be surprised if it's the end of the 2028 season and the 2029 Super Bowl. And we are going to get it. The question is when does it fit into the construction around the building and the development of this massive 600-acre property on the East Bank? And if they can get enough things done to get the stadium usable, build out huge infrastructure for media, you can explain all the stuff that you just were down there, right? Like the amount of stuff that New Orleans has around, hotel rooms have to be cleared, convention centers have to be open. All this stuff has to happen. You can't start a bunch of new projects and then just pause them in the middle of it for 2 months with half-built buildings all over the stadium. You can't do it. And so I think I'm actually coming around. This is against what I previously thought, but having done some digging on this, I think we're going to get it earlier than I anticipated. And I think that could be January, February of 2029, which is a year earlier than I thought. So that's my thought. That's my guess. That's my prediction. So,
all right. When is Nashville hosting when will Nashville host its second Super Bowl, Braden?
After the Final Four of 2035.
Pun intended. I'm asking you to be an oracle here.
I like that. Before Oracle's campus is done. How about that?
That's a fun prediction. I've had the 2030 season into 31 circled for quite a while. I'm sure you were on there as well. So you're 2 years earlier than your previous prediction.
My ultimate prediction would be the 29 season going into
February 30.
But now I'm at 28 season going into 29. So
there's just something pretty about a round number. I'll say the 2030 season into 31. But you never know. I
want Super Bowl like 62 and then Super Bowl like 69. Just to be an adolescent child for like 3 months.
I will not learn the Roman numeral.
Jason says I want another draft. I don't know. I feel like the draft, because here's like if you look at the visuals of the draft, right, with the neon lights and all the presentation of the visuals on television, that's what the NFL wants. They want something that looks unique and extraordinary. While I am a Green Bay Packers shareholder and love the Green Bay Packers and think that everyone should journey to football mecca that is Lambeau Field in the middle of a small neighborhood in a small blue-collar Midwestern town on a lake where it's very cold. I think all of that's amazing stuff as a football fan and as a fan of the Green Bay Packers and a Wisconsin native, originally born. It is not going to look good on television. I don't think it's going to play well from an attendance standpoint unless you're going to see Lambeau, which I think is worth it for everybody. I would recommend doing it when the Titans are playing and go see your own team play there. But the visuals of the neon lights, well, it's sort of a punchline for locals, Broadway looking and being and acting like it is very good television. And I just, the draft was a little crazy for me because I don't enjoy the, it's just a whole lot of money and investment and expense to go as a fan to see a little human walk on a stage 300 feet away. Like I don't get, but it was a lot of fun to cover. I enjoyed my job that week. That was great.
The best part of the draft, and this is going to sound incredibly stupid, but trust me here. I've thought about this. The best part of the draft, whether you're viewing in person, whether you're viewing at home, on television, whatever it is, the best part of the draft is the little jingle that plays when the pick is in. And it is a great jingle. We can all remember it. The da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. We all know it. But it's the anticipation. Thank you. It's the anticipation. It is the pick is in. And there's this Pavlovian response of you hear the pick is in, infinite possibilities. You're glued to your TV. You're waiting for Roger Goodell to read an envelope. Like it's very strange to try to explain to somebody who doesn't get it. But when you are in person, you do lose that a little bit. And I'm talking as somebody who stood in the rain in 2019 on Broadway and watched the draft as a spectator. It's a little bit.
You weren't working that? I guess you would have been on a totally different beat. You just would come up. Were in Nashville hanging out.
Yeah, I was in Nashville hanging out. That was the year AJ and DK were in the draft, and I was covering Ole Miss, so there was like some defense of weird comment.
You didn't cover Jeffrey Simmons as well?
I did not. But all of that stuff was fun and strange. And I remember that was right around when the song Old Town Road was becoming the most popular sensation, and they played it like 4 times, and everybody was in a poncho talking about having the horses in the back, and it was a really fun, strange experiences. But
shout out to friends of the pod, Moon Taxi, by the way. Our music on this show is Moon Taxi, so thanks to the boys who played a concert that night before the first round.
But yeah, don't lose the experience. Don't sacrifice the main joy of the draft, which is the anticipation of what's about to happen. You still see giant "the pick is in" letters, and that was super fun. But
it's just Broadway just funnels you, so you have to be so far away if you're not up front, and it's just you're like, oh, who's that? Look at that little linebacker. Oh, okay. Braden says Derek Carr coming in hot, saving money, and won't be as messy as signing as Nick susses hair. That's rude. It's just rude this late into the show. Austin, this is a good way to end this conversation. Austin, is there any one at number 1 that they could pick that would piss you off? Sanders and Ward are meh, but who would make you so confused? I mean, honestly, Sanders would be very confusing to me, and I probably would be upset about it. Cam Ward, I understand it now. I'm kind of coming around on that, even though I wouldn't advise on it or don't want it to happen. If they draft like Mason Graham, who is a really good football player, I'd be like, what are you doing? I mean, like, an offensive lineman would be insane. Like, Will Campbell at 1 would be insane. Like, you need to draft Orlando Pace at number 1, not Will Campbell. And if it was Orlando Pace, I would say do it, actually.
I'd be pretty pissed off if they drafted, like, my 14-year-old sister-in-law. I don't think that would be a good draft pick. That would probably not.
That's a big influx of cash into the family, though.
It would be a godsend for the windfall, but I don't think it would be good for the Titans. I don't think they should draft my retired grandmother.
Stop.
I'm just like, these are things that wouldn't be good.
Don't be a smartass. Answer the question. Which player who's reasonably projected in the top? Malachi Starks is the best safety in the draft. That would piss me off.
If you are sticking at 1 and you draft anybody who is not named Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, Abdul Carter, or Travis Hunter, you have made a bad pick.
I'm down to Carter Ward. I do think Hunter's a really good pick, so I can't. He would make your team better. There's no question about that. All right, there you go. What the NFL is saying about the Titans. You got a conversation with DeAndre Hopkins, who's pissed off for greatness still. And obviously, we've got lots of different options, trade rumors floating around. This is the must-lie season here. So Jaguars, do stupid stuff. That would be fun if you're a Titans fan. Otherwise, we'll see what happens here. And just to get clarification here, if it is a trade to acquire a player like Stafford or Derek Carr, that can happen at any point, right?
Right. As we're speaking right now, the Jets just put out a statement informing they're moving on from Aaron Rodgers. So that seems to be official now.
Okay. Well, when Jay Glazer said it, I thought it was official.
No, I'm just saying official versus officially official, whatever we want to say.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, Aaron Rodgers available, coming to town. He's got land here. I don't think he's got a house on that land, but he's got land.
Land man.
Does anybody know that there's land here in Nashville that Aaron Rodgers owns? Does anyone know that Bill Belichick has had a house here for like 20 years?
Bryce Harper.
He's never once considered it coming here. People like states with property values that increase very fast with no income tax in a cultural hub of the region. It's pretty self-explanatory. All right. Thank you, Nick, for hanging out. Tennessean.com. Go check it out and read all of his good stuff there, and all the bad stuff too that he writes. Go check it out. Subscribe to the Tennessean and pay for good journalism. Please go to Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue as well. Thank you, all of you, for being in the comments today. Wonderful chat. You guys were very lively. I do appreciate that. Thumbs up on the YouTube page, notifications on, etc., 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 etc. All right. So there you go. Jason, is this where he lives in his yurt? Look, there's a lot of development out there in Thompson Station and Leapers Fork. Maybe there's not space for yurts anymore. We'll see. For Nick, I'm Braden. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will be back next week. We'll talk to you then. Thanks.